Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of WION-VOA Co-Production. I'm Susan Tehrani, your host, coming to you live from New York City. Well, we begin with an effort in Washington to restrict the popular social media app TikTok. The U.S. House of Representatives passed the bill on Wednesday that would force short video app TikTok, used by about 170 million Americans, to divest from its Chinese owner ByteDance or face a ban in the country. But as VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports, the bill faces significant criticism about restriction of free speech and may not pass in the U.S. Senate.
After years of concern about data privacy on the popular social media app, U.S. lawmakers took a key step Wednesday, calling for TikTok to separate from its Chinese parent company, ByteDance.
Today, we send a clear message that we will not tolerate our adversaries weaponizing our freedoms against us.
With significant bipartisan support, the bill addresses concerns TikTok is a national security threat.
Americans need to ask themselves whether they want to give the Chinese government the ability to control access to their data, whether they want to give the Chinese government the ability to control the information they get through the recommendation algorithm, and whether they want to give the Chinese government the ability to leverage the data.
The bill is passed.
TikTok has denied those allegations, calling the House bill a ban. The bill's co-sponsors push back against that claim.
Our intention is for TikTok to continue to operate, but not under the control of the Chinese Communist Party.
China condemned the vote Tuesday.
The U.S. has not found any evidence of TikTok threatening national security. It has never stopped going after TikTok.
And many U.S. lawmakers and civil liberties groups say singling out the app is unfair and limits Americans' rights to free speech.
Any ban on TikTok is not just banning the freedom of expression. You are literally causing huge harm to our national economy.
The TikTok legislation has revived the debate over data privacy and personal freedoms.
There are bigger issues taking away from the American life than TikTok. I mean, people can't afford groceries, and we're concerned about a social media apps.
Security for all of the platforms are just, they're under scrutiny right now, and I think for good reason. I don't have a lot of trust in the platforms and in the information that's provided these days. I'm just very concerned about the authenticity.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said committees would consider the bill, which could face significant legal challenges.
The U.S. government would have a very, very difficult job of convincing a court that this ban is both narrowly tailored enough to advance this government interest of data privacy, but then also that there are no less restrictive measures that the government could have taken.
President Joe Biden has said he will sign the bill into law if it passes the U.S. Senate. The Biden campaign joined TikTok earlier this year to reach out to younger voters. Catherine Gibson, VOA News.
Game or halftime show?
Game.
Jason Kelsey or Travis Kelsey?
Mama Kelsey. I understand she makes great chocolate chip cookies.
VOA's Jessica Stone joins us now live with additional reporting. She's at the White House. Jessica, good to see you. TikTok mounted an effort this week to lobby Washington against the bill. What can you tell us about that and those efforts?
Well, I just want to tell you what's going on behind me. We're going to have an honor guard for the Irish Prime Minister because of the upcoming St. Paddy's Day. But in answer to your question, the company has really put on a full court press. They've had ongoing commercials throughout the D.C. TV market encouraging people to call their congressmen and senators about this issue, ask them not to greenlight this bill. And TikTok also organized 2 days of events on Capitol Hill where influencers came in. They talked about the benefits to their small businesses, to their identities, to some of their missions, including preventing drunk driving, other kinds of healthcare issues. TikTok CEO Shu Chu also took to the app itself, encouraging people to call their congressmen and senators and saying he opposed the bill. He has been thanking the community on TikTok for their influence in this regard. And also, he will meet with lawmakers this week to discuss this further. Susan?
Yeah, I was surprised to see that there were commercials on TV supporting TikTok as well. So President Donald Trump, who officially clinched the presidential nomination this week after primary votes on Tuesday, has switched his position on limiting TikTok in the U.S. How is that playing out on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, it's a really interesting flip of the switch, really, because remember, President Donald Trump, when he was in office, he tried to ban TikTok, and that effort ultimately did not come to pass, but he took a very strong position against the app. Now he says he doesn't want to limit TikTok because, quote, without TikTok, you can make Facebook bigger, he says, and I consider Facebook, quote, to be an enemy of the people. Now, Trump's former Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, just told CNBC this week he is trying to organize a group of investors to buy the app from ByteDance, but the Chinese government has already taken steps since 2020 to ensure it can veto the sale of the app to any outside party. In the Senate, we're seeing Majority Leader Chuck Schumer take the stand that he will allow this measure that's been passed in the House to go to committee, but he is not committed to bring it to the floor, although the White House is pressuring senators heavily to pass this bill. The president, as Catherine Gibson says, is committed to signing it if it comes to his desk. Back to you.
All right. Well, Jessica, thanks for that. And now stay with us, please. I'd love to get your take on our next story, which is a story that you filed yourself. Critical funds to counter China in the Pacific are finally approved for 3 U.S. allies, Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. Over the weekend, U.S. President Joe Biden signed into law $7 billion over 20 years in funding for the Compact of Free Association as part of a partial government funding bill. VOA's Jessica Stone reports.
The yeas are 75, the nays are 22. The motion is agreed to.
With this vote in the U.S. Senate, partial funding flows to the U.S. government. For the tiny Pacific nation of Palau, a U.S. ally, it's a lifeline.
It's not October 1st, but it's at least within this fiscal year and really just in time.
Palau maintains diplomatic relations with Taiwan, but its economy relies on Chinese tourists, who dropped by more than 50% in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, tanking the nation's economy. Whip says he recently met with investors from Singapore and Japan to chart a more sustainable direction.
Opening up new markets so that we're diversified and more resilient and not so dependent on the Chinese tourism, which could be weaponized.
Palau's funds come through an agreement that provides $7 billion in economic aid over 20 years to Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. In exchange, the U.S. gets exclusive access to a broad swath of the Pacific and the right to turn others away, including China.
Simply having the freedom of navigation through this area of the Pacific is really critical. And if we lose that, we also lose direct access to our allies in the Philippines and Australia.
The agreement was renewed and signed last fall, but Congress took 5 months to fund it. The delay raised doubts about Washington's commitment to the Pacific, warned Marshall Islands President Hilda Hine.
Our nation has been a steadfast ally of the United States, but that should not be taken for granted.
In a video message on Facebook, Wesley Simina, president of the Federated States of Micronesia, or FSM, acknowledged the long wait.
This understandably may have stirred doubt and uncertainty. But in this, you can be certain. At the end of the day, the FSM and the U.S. reached an agreement on an outcome that I am confident will benefit both our nations.
It's an agreement, these leaders say, that provides new motivation to deepen economic and security cooperation in a part of the world that's critical to American security. Jessica Stone, VOA News, Washington.
VOA's Jessica Stone is still with us from the White House. Jessica, how does this specific agreement that you just reported on play into the U.S. efforts to deter or counter a potential invasion by Taiwan?
Well, these 3 islands, out of them, only one of them has relations with Beijing, diplomatic relations. That island is Micronesia. But all 3 of these island nations, they are part of what defense planners call the second island chain. And they're considered critical, really since World War II, to be places where the U.S. military or any allied military can stage troops, defense measures like weapons, and also sensors to monitor the region. And it's part of the U.S. plan to project influence into the region. It's also part of China's. efforts to project influence in the region. And the U.S. military has already been using this region, particularly in the Marshall Islands. They have a U.S. military testing facility in Kwajalein Atoll. And last year, the Pentagon proposed protective equipment, basically a defense unit in Palau, because it is planning to install over-the-horizon radar, which will be able to better monitor the region for the activities of Beijing and other militaries. Susan?
And finally, Jessica, this week, top intelligence officials testified on Capitol Hill about what they say are the most significant global threats. What are they saying about the potential timing of a Taiwan invasion?
They're still looking at 2027 as the time in which the Chinese military expects to be prepared to go into Taiwan and reunify. I would note that the most recent party Congress did not any longer use the word peaceful reunification as it pertains to Taiwan. But one of the ways that Washington is pushing back is that it has these regular military exercises with its allies, the South Koreans, Philippines, sometimes Indonesia, and the like. And each time it's there, it is intentionally leaving behind equipment to stage for any potential contingencies, whether it's a conflict of this nature or simply a natural disaster. For example, Washington left 33 vehicles and 130 containers behind in Australia after those recent military exercises last summer, and Army General Charles Flynn has said that he wants to do this going forward. I would note that the most recent or most timely next series of military exercises is going to be between the U.S. and the Philippines. That takes place on April 28th. Susan?
All right, we'll be watching very closely. VOA's Jessica Stone joining us from the White House. Jessica, thank you so much for all of that, and happy St. Patrick's Day weekend.
Thank you. You too.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.